Chapter 3. Virtue not always rewarded. It was not to be expected that such an occurrence could be passed entirely over, but then again, it's difficult to punish 7 children at the same time. At first, Captain Woolcot had requested Esther to ask Miss Marsh, the governess, to give them all 10 French verbs to learn. But, as Judy pointed out, the General and Baby and Bunty and Nell had not arrived at the dignity of French verbs yet, so such a punishment would be iniquitous. The sentence, therefore, had not been quite decided upon as yet, and everyone felt in an uncomfortable state of suspense. "Your father says you're a disgraceful tribe," said the young stepmother slowly, sitting down on the nursery rocking chair a day later. She had on a trailing morning wrapper of white muslin with cherry ribbons, but there was a pin doing duty for a button in 1 or 2 places, and the lace was hanging off a bit at the sleeve. "Meg, dear, you're very untidy, you know, and Judy's absolutely hopeless." Meg was attired in an unbecoming green cashmere, with the elbows out and the plush torn off in several places, while Judy's exceedingly scant and faded pink zephyr had rents in several places, and the colour was hardly to be seen for fruit stains. Meg coloured a little. "I know, Esther, and I'd like to be nicely dressed as well as anyone, but it really isn't worth mending these old things." She picked up a book about the elegant girls who were disturbing her serenity and went over to the armchair with it. "Well, Judy, you go and sew up those rents and put some buttons on your frock." Esther spoke with unusual determination. Judy's eyes snapped and sparkled. "Is that a dagger I see before me, the handle to my hand? Come, let me grasp it," she said saucily, snatching one of the pins from Esther's dress, fastening her own with it, and dropping a curtsy. Esther reddened a little now. "That's the General, Judy. He always pulls the buttons off my wrappers when I play with him. But I'm forgetting. Children, I have bad news for you." There was a breathless silence. Everyone crowded round her knees. "Sentence has been proclaimed," said Judy dramatically. "Let us shave our heads and don sackcloth." "Your father says he cannot allow such conduct to go unpunished, especially as you have all been unusually tiresome lately. Therefore you are all to be taken away and hanged by the neck until we're dead." "Be quiet, Judy. I've tried my best to beg you off, but it only makes him more vexed. He says you are the untidiest, most unruly lot of children in Sydney, and he will punish you each time you do anything, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." "Oh, shut up, Judy. Can't you let us hear?" Pip put his hand over her mouth and held her by the hair while Esther told the news. "None of you are to go to the pantomime. The seats were taken for Thursday night, and now, you very foolish children, you will all have to stay at home." There was a perfect howl of dismay for a minute or two. They had all been looking forward to this treat for nearly a month, and the disappointment was a really bitter one to them all. "Oh, I say, Esther, that's too bad, really. All the fellows at school have been." Pip's handsome face flushed angrily. "And for such a little thing, too. Just because you had roast fowl for dinner," said Judy in a half-choked voice. "Oh, Esther, why couldn't you have had cow or horse or hippopotamus, anything but roast fowl?" "Couldn't you get around him, Esther?" Meg looked anxiously at her. "Dear Esther, do. Oh, you sweet, beautiful Essie, do try." They clung round her eagerly. Baby flung her arms round her neck and nearly choked her. Nell stroked her cheek. Pip patted her back and besought her to be a good fellow. Bunty buried his nose in her back hair and wept a silent tear. Meg clasped her hand in an access of unhappiness. The General gave a series of delighted squeaks, and Judy, in her wretchedness, smacked him for his pains. Esther would do her best, and they let her go at last with that assurance. Only, I'd advise you all to be preternaturally good and quiet all day, she said, looking back from the doorway. That would have most effect with him, and he's going to be at home all day. It was absolutely painful to witness the virtue of those children for the rest of the day. It was holiday time, and Miss Marsh was away, but not once did the sound of quarrelling or laughing or crying fly down to the lower regions. "Citizens of Rome, the eyes of the world are upon you," Judy had said solemnly, and all had promised so to conduct themselves that their father's heart could not fail to be melted. Pip put on his school jacket, brushed his hair, took a pile of school books, and proceeded to the study where his father was writing letters, and where he was allowed to do his home lessons.
"Well, what do you want?" said the captain with a frown. "No, it's no good coming to me about that pup, sir. I won't have you keep it."
"I came to study, sir," said Pip mildly. "I feel I'm a bit backward with my mathematics, so I won't waste all the holidays when I'm costing you so much in school fees." The captain gave a little gasp and looked hard at Pip, but the boy's face was so unsmiling and earnest that he was disarmed, and actually congratulated himself that his eldest son was at last seeing the error of his ways.
"There are those sets of problems in that drawer that I did when I was at school," he said graciously. "If they're of any use to you, you can get them out."
"Thanks awfully. They'll be a great help." He examined them with admiration plainly depicted upon his face. "How very clearly and correctly you worked, Father," he said with a sigh. "I wonder if I'll ever get as good as this." "How old were you, Father, when you did them?"
"Oh, about your age,"
said the captain, picking up the papers. He examined them with his head on one side. He was rather proud of them, seeing he had utterly forgotten now how to work with decimal fractions, and could not have done a quadratic equation to save his life.
"Still, I don't think you need to be quite discouraged, Pip. I was rather beyond the other boys in my class in these subjects, I remember. We can't all excel in the same thing, and I'm glad to see you're beginning to realize the importance of work."
"Yes, Father." Meg had betaken herself to the drawing-room and was sitting on the floor before the music canterbury with scissors, thimble, and a roll of narrow blue ribbon on her knee, and all her father's songs that he so often complained were falling to pieces spread out before her. He saw her once as he passed the door and looked surprised and pleased.
"Thank you, Margaret. They wanted it badly. I'm glad you can make yourself useful after all," he said.
"Yes, Father." Meg stitched on industriously. He went back to his study, where Pip's head was at a studious, absorbed angle, and pyramids of books and sheaves of paper were on the table. He wrote 2 more letters, and there became a little knock at the door.